The year is 1971. The Brady Bunch is one of the most popular shows on television. The Beatles had broken up a year before, and the United States was still waging a war in Vietnam. However, one of the most important pieces of legislation passed in 1971 was President Richard Nixon declaring a war on drugs. As most of you know, the crack epidemic of the 80s and the opioid crisis of the 2010s were directly caused by this drug war. As someone who pays attention to the news, I believe this is one of the most underrated topics talked about today in politics. The war on drugs is costly and ineffective, caused by outdated laws and lobbying. However, the solution can be to ending some lobbying and decriminalization or legalization. First, we will discuss the problems with the war on drugs. Second, we will discuss the causes of the war on drugs. And then lastly, we will discuss the solutions to the war on drugs. Now, we will discuss the problems with the war on drugs. The war on drugs is costly and ineffective. The Center for American Progress reported in 2018 that since 1971, $1.2 trillion has been spent on the war on drugs. Imagine what we could have used that money on. Schools, infrastructure, housing, anything. Also, Vox did report in 2015 that 12% of all criminals in prison are nonviolent drug offenders. 12% may seem like a lot, but the Bureau of Justice Statistics reported in 2015 that over 1.5 million prisoners are in the U.S. system. So if you take 12% by 1.5 million, you get around 183,000 prisoners. And you multiply by that $33,000 a year around, according to the Vera Institute, you get approximately $6 billion per year spent on non-violent drug offenders. People who literally do not commit any violent crimes, they're just in prison for drugs, which I think is a shame. Another thing is ineffectiveness. Since in 2017, the CDC reported that over 70,000 deaths were caused by overdoses, which the drug war's goal was to decrease drug use, drug deaths, and drug possession. However, that has failed. We can even see its failures tracing back to the crack epidemic of the mid-'80s, where crack use skyrocketed. So the drug war has just been shown once again to be a major failure. Next, we will discuss the problems with the war on drugs. And the issue is the outdated laws. In 1986, a bipartisan bill called the Anti-Drug Use Act, passed by Congress and then sent into office by Ronald Reagan, introduced a way to end major drug trafficking and introduced mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums was a way, if you had a certain amount of drugs, you get thrown in prison for a 5 or 10 year sentence. However, this would disproportionately affect small-time dealers, as only 11% of major drug traffickers were arrested. So imagine if you were dealing 1 gram of LSD to a guy who was going to take it in the privacy of his own home. No harm done to anyone. However, you get pulled over by a cop, and they see that LSD on you, and you have intent to sell. That is an automatic 5-year sentence without parole in prison. So your life is basically ruined over a victimless crime. Now another issue with the war on drugs and the causes of it are lobbying. The Washington Post reported in 2017 that over $100 million of corporate lobbying went into keeping the drug war in the status quo. We have seen countless Congress people being bought off, mainly according to the Freedom of Economic Education. Groups such as police unions, alcohol companies, and Big Pharma want to keep marijuana illegal so they don't have any competition. However, in 2018, in his interview with 60 Minutes, ex-DEA agent Joe Renazizi said that Big Pharma corporations are intentionally keeping pharmaceuticals illegal so they can flood the market with them, in process leading to more people getting hooked on even more lethal drugs and potentially getting people getting thrown in prison for it. Now we have come to the part where we'll discuss the solutions to the war on drugs. And the biggest issue is trying to end lobbying. Our congressmen and women have no integrity. All they care about is money. The cynic in me says they will never stop lobbying, and they're probably right. However, there is some maybe light at the end of the tunnel. In 2019, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, and Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas both agreed to end lobbying of ex-Congress members, as most of them are bought out by Big Pharma, so we could see a potential ending of lobbying. However, we haven't seen anything to come to fruition as of 2020. Another thing we could do is decriminalize drugs. A great example of this is Portugal, as their crippling heroin epidemic of the 1980s showed horrendous drug use throughout that country. So in 2001, they decided to decriminalize all drugs, and this worked out amazingly. To quote a 2017 Guardian article, the opioid crisis soon stabilized, and the ensuing years saw dramatic drops in problematic drug use, HIV and hepatitis infection rates, overdose deaths, drug-related crime, and incarceration rates. So we saw in Portugal decriminalization works. If you're a drug addict, you should be in rehabilitation, not in prison. And another thing we could see is legalization. One of the most contentious issues in American politics is marijuana legalization. Colorado was the first state to do that in 2012 as they passed Amendment 64, and which led marijuana to be legal in the year 2014. And it also has shown a strong economic benefit. According to CNBC in 2019, between 2014 and 2018, the state of Colorado earned $6 billion in marijuana revenue. So we can see that the state of Colorado has gotten economic benefits, and the country of Portugal has earned social benefits. So decriminalization or even legalization can be seen as solutions to stopping this hideous drug war. So in conclusion, the war on drugs is costly and ineffective, caused by outdated laws and lobbying. But the solutions we can see are decriminalization and ending lobbying. First, we discussed the costly and ineffective nature of the drug war. Then we discussed the outdated laws like the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 and the major lobbying with it. And lastly, we discussed the solutions such as Ted Cruz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's proposal to end lobbying of ex-Congress members, and marijuana legalization and decriminalization of all drugs. So the war on drugs is an impossible war to win. You can't win this war. And I would ask you a question, audience. Why? Why do we keep putting these people in office that don't care about the American people? All they care about is money. They don't care about anything. And the Cato Institute even said in 2019 that 55% of Americans support decriminalization. So we just keep putting these people in office. Why can't we want change? Why can't we have reform? We need change and reform. This war on drugs, you can't win it.